Welcome back to Introduction to Talmudic Legal Logic. And in this lecturette, we're going to talk a little bit about how people study Talmud throughout the world. So, one of the most obvious places where people study Talmud, of course, is in Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox yeshivot. You're seeing a picture, an image from what a study hall in a yeshiva would look like. So these are folks who spend their entire day at the yeshiva. Typically, they will study in pairs with another person. That's called a chevruta, when two people study together. And usually you get very used to the style of learning of the other person, and people stay in the same chevruta. It's a very strong study partnership and friendship that often will last for many, many years in a person's life. People in Orthodox yeshivot will follow the Daf Yomi schedule, so they will study a page of Talmud a day, and the page is the same page throughout the entire Jewish world. All the yeshiva is on the same page. There will be sometimes talks by the rabbi or one of the rabbis in a yeshiva of this size. There will be many, many rabbis that work in the yeshiva. And this is essentially these people's job. So in Israel, for example, there are thousands of people who are essentially their employment. They have an exemption from the army. They don't work a traditional job. What they do is study. And oftentimes, if this person is married and has children, then the provider for the family is the wife, who also works a full-time job. So this is the way Talmud study looks like in Orthodox yeshivot. But Talmud, as I often say, is for everyone. And today you can find a lot of scenarios that are less orthodox where people study Talmud in all kinds of progressive, liberal, more free, creative interpretation scenarios. This is an image from a progressive Bet Midrash. Oftentimes, even Batei Midrashim that are progressive will keep the Chevruta method, where people study alongside a partner or in a group. Um, and sometimes these Batei Midrash will stick to the traditional daily page, and sometimes they will have topical discussions, which will involve texts from maybe various tractates in the Talmud that belong together, or maybe will refer those texts to other sources or to external texts that are secular texts or texts from other cultural realms, and the study is taking a little bit of a different form, although these people are studying Talmud just like the Orthodox people are studying Talmud. There is also a great deal of interest in the Talmud in academic circles, people who do Jewish studies, people who do Talmud studies. There's lots of books that you can peruse that are interesting. And Talmud scholarship takes a lot of forms. Let me talk to you a little bit about what seems to be hot right now in the area of Talmud. So what you will sometimes see is very close text readings that compare, for example, versions of certain stories or certain halachot or certain tropes between the Yerushalmi, which, as you already know, is the Talmud that was redacted in Eretz Israel, and the Bavli, which was redacted in Babylonia, to try and see whether there are any permutations, whether that reflects different approaches, different values, different ideologies, different theologies. So there will be these kinds of comparisons. There will sometimes be careful comparisons between different manuscripts of the Talmud, because not all manuscripts are created alike or printed alike. And again, this requires a lot of very careful source work that people will do in people of this academic caliber will do. A lot of the new literature about the Talmud adopts a variety of critical perspectives that those of you who have some experience with social sciences and the humanities probably know from other areas of human knowledge. So there is a feminist commentary on the Talmud. It's quite extensive. There's a lot of commentaries that are based on queer theory and all kinds of comments about sort of gender and non-binary genders and gender defiant issues in the Talmud, trying to find sort of contrasting voices or read the text against the grain. You'll find some texts that are some scholarly texts that speak of the Talmud and look at it through the prism of post-colonial commentaries to kind of like try to mine it for different approaches to empire, governmentality, things like that. Because the Talmud makes a lot of reference to animals, usually in the context of sacrifice or in the context of agricultural farm animals, there's quite a bit of literature that traverses kind of the area between the Talmud and animal rights and comments on animals. There is commentary that looks at class issues, power, and authority. So, in general, a lot of this is going to look at things through the critical perspectives that came into fashion in academic circles in the 80s and 90s with the emergence of postmodernism and the like. The other thing that you find sometimes in academic circles is the discussion of the impact of the environment. So they're going to look at these texts in light of what surrounded them. How much of the Talmud mirrors things that you can see, for example, in Greek mythology or in Roman mythology, or in stories and texts that existed in the surrounding empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Sasanian Empire. How much of this mirrors things that we know from the early canons of Christianity? So sometimes there will be all these kinds of conversations and connections that that academic study of the Talmud will try to make. So, one of the things that is important to talk about is where the tradition of studying the Talmud in a methodical way every day emerged from. And this is what we call the Daf Yomi, or the daily page. And it gets established in 1922. And the idea is that everybody in the Jewish world is looking at the same Talmud page, a page a day. And a page a day, by the way, you don't get breaks for Shabbat. You study on Shabbat. You study on holidays. There's no breaks. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. Usually, the fact that you learn a page, and you probably, if you haven't already seen, you will see that going through a Talmud page is a lot of work because the logic is often complicated to understand, and you have to follow a lot of strands of logic and try to think about why this makes sense and what they're trying to refer to and what they mean. That doesn't give you a lot of time for in-depth critical deep dives into the texts, right? You're just sort of going over the logics. But because everybody who reads the Talmud sees things a little bit different because we all come to it from our different perspectives, you can get a plethora of personal takes, right? Because everybody's daf yomi is different. There's no two daf yomi. The page itself is the same page, but what people take from it is very, very different. Now, if you decide to get on this bandwagon and actually study a Talmud page every day, you will finish in about 7 years. So it takes 7 years to finish the entire Talmud, and then you start from the beginning. Everybody is on the same schedule. In many yeshivot, it's traditional whenever you finish a tractate to throw a big party for everybody and to say a special blessing. And for people who feel that a page a day is a lot to take on and they want to take things in somewhat smaller bites so that they can really immerse themselves in this, there's also a weekly daf schedule, but of course that's going to take a lot longer to finish. That's the project of a lifetime. The other thing I want to point out is that there's a lot of new media that does this Daf Yomi thing. So if you were to go to any podcast platform and look for Daf Yomis, you would find hundreds of people doing this. You can subscribe to a podcast, you can get a little explanation from that person, 15 minutes. They walk you through the Daf Yomi. And you can pick and choose because there's lots of different perspectives. So it's whichever, rabbi or authority or person you're interested in like their take. So this is definitely something that's proliferated in the last few years and people can sometimes take advantage of.